back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for all right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final. Back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for
keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Monday, February 19th. We have a lot to talk about on the show today, but before I get into that, I just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized, make sure to go to the following link. That is streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker on the bottom of the show segment down below. So, with that being said, let's get into what we were going to talk about for today. So we'll start off the show by talking about Jimmy Garoppolo being suspended and also being released by the Raiders, and we'll talk about that and how that impacts the Raiders' quarterback situation going forward. Then in the second part of the show, we'll talk about some scenarios that could define the offseason. It was an article that I saw on Bleacher Report, and I wanted to talk about that and give my thoughts on these possible moves, these possible scenarios. So we'll get into that. Then we will talk about Micah Parsons and a couple of things he suggested the Cowboys should do in the offseason. And then we'll talk about the Steelers quarterback situation once again, because there's some stuff to talk about regarding Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph. So that will be the final part of the show. So with that being said, let's get into the first topic, which is talking about Jimmy Garoppolo. And this, honestly, this was like kind of surprising. This kind of just, I don't know, came out of nowhere. So he is going to be suspended for the first 2 games next season because he violated the NFL's performance enhancing substance policy. And the reason for that, and I did a short on this, and it took me 7 tries to say the correct thing, and because I want to pull up the Adam Schefter tweet really quickly. So yeah, so he's going to be suspended, and now if I wish I had the tweet up right away, but of course it's not going to come up. And the reason for that is, I know it doesn't say it, of course, but it basically. It had to do with the medication he was doing. So yeah, so he was using a prescribed medication without obtaining a valid therapeutic use exemption. That's what it was, and that's a mouthful. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess it wasn't. It's not like when you look at some other scenarios and it's like, the person was, trying to, get a competitive advantage over other players, but I get, yeah, it's just one of those things where you were taking medication and it's something that wasn't approved, and that ended up happening, and now he's suspended. Now, to go along with that, the Raiders, they ended up releasing Garoppolo, which you kind of figured was going to happen, and yeah, that was that turned out not to be a good signing, which I think we all kind of figured. But yeah, so this was anticipated, especially after he was benched for Aiden O'Connell during the season. The Raiders will release Garoppolo before an $11.25 million roster bonus would activate in March, saving $11.269 million on the salary cap. Garoppolo signed a 3-year, $72.75 million contract last offseason. But again, injuries and just did not play well. That led to him being benched and ultimately being released. Now, this will result in about a $17 million dead cap money hit, but will provide cap savings for the team. Listen, the Raiders have the number 13 overall pick, so most likely they'll probably, you would think maybe they're going to go with a quarterback. Now, listen, Aiden O'Connell didn't do a bad job. There were definitely some games, though, where, he didn't play well. Other times he did. You go back to the game against the Vikings when the Raiders lost 3-0. That's one that comes to mind. You also go... listen, they did beat the Chiefs in Kansas City, but that was also because, they didn't complete a pass after the first quarter, which is crazy to think about, because they had the 2 defensive touchdowns, and listen, they ran the ball with Zamir White, and again, I'll bring it up. He was part of the reason why I lost in the playoffs in my fantasy playoffs. So I'm upset about that. Still, I'm not going to get over it. But yeah, listen, I think Aiden O'Connell will still be on this team, but I don't think he's not the starter moving forward. They're going to have to upgrade. Now, I don't know if it's going to be through the draft, most likely, I think. But I also, an article I was looking at, they also listed 4 quarterbacks that they could possibly, go with. So they brought up Jacoby Brissett. Now, Jacoby Brissett's bounced around a lot since, being with the Patriots. And listen, I think he's a quality backup quarterback. He was the starter for the Browns, when they were waiting for Deshaun Watson to come back, not this past season, but last year. And he wins games, and I think that's definitely somebody to consider. But again, they might be looking towards the draft. Now they also mentioned Tyrod Taylor as well, another experienced quarterback. Was decent for the Giants at times. They won a couple of games with him. But then they bring up in the draft, they talk about J.J. McCarthy from Michigan and also Spencer Rattler as well. And it says how he could be a day 2 pick, Spencer Rattler. So, we'll just have to wait and see what they end up doing. They changed offensive coordinators, bringing in Luke Getsky over from the Bears. Now, it's unlikely that, maybe they trade for a quarterback. So it's either they're going to sign somebody or they're going to draft somebody. That's really what it's going to come down to. But, yeah, you kind of feel for Garoppolo because, he goes from the 49ers, goes to the Raiders, and it just it was a downward spiral. And I honestly thought that when he first got to the 49ers that he was going to be a really good player for them. Because I want to go back to when he first got there. And, yeah, so with the Niners in 2017, had 1,500 yards passing, 7 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. But if you go back to all those games, they won every game that he started in 2017 when he got there. I want to pull that up really quick. And even in the couple games that he played in 2018, I know they lost the first game of the year to the Vikings, but I don't know. I thought I thought he looked good, and then he gets hurt, comes back, and listen, the 49ers go to the Super Bowl, but I don't know. It seemed like he just wasn't the same player before the ACL injury that he suffered against the Chiefs in 2018. But yeah, he won every game that he started. So his first game was against the Bears, won that. He actually came in late the previous week against the Seahawks. I remember that. But yeah, they beat the Bears, then they beat the Texans, the Titans, the Jaguars. They beat a couple of playoff teams in there, Titans and the Jaguars. And then they also, again, the Rams were resting their starters, but, he won that game as well. So, and the Niners started off the year 0-9. So imagine if they would have got Garoppolo earlier, what would have happened? So they ended up finishing 6-10. And, and then gets hurt the following season. They go to the Super Bowl. They lose to the Chiefs. Then 2020 happens. The 49ers get ravaged by injuries. And the Niners, they drafted Trey Lance, and he was supposed to be the guy. But, Garoppolo plays in 2021, get to the NFC Championship game. The following year, Trey Lance is the starter. He gets hurt. Garoppolo comes in, and the Niners looked good. And then he gets hurt, and then Brock Purdy comes in, and that was the end of Garoppolo. And then he ends up on the Raiders, reuniting with Josh McDaniels, and it really just did not go well for him there. And the Raiders, they won their first game against the Broncos. And, then I remember, playing against the Bills, they, they go right down the field in their first drive, and then the Bills just dominated the rest of the game. That ended up being a blowout loss. But yeah, so Garoppolo, in his only season with the Raiders, 1,200 yards passing, 7 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 77.7 passer rating. Yeah, not good. Not good. And listen, now he's going to... first of all, he's got to get past this suspension, which, again, is only 2 games. But, now he's got to try to build up his value again. And I feel like a team will give him a shot. At least just pick him up, maybe be a backup. I think he can at least do that. But, yeah, it's just, and this is the other thing I was talking about, too, last week when talking about the Patriots. I was supposed to replace Brady. That's what Belichick wanted. And Robert Kraft was like, we're not doing that. And, so, things changed. Goes to the 49ers. Looked like he was going to be the guy there for a long time. And it just, the 49ers tried to draft his replacement. And then it ended up being Brock Purdy instead. It was supposed to be Trey Lance. They gave up a lot to get to move up in the draft to draft Trey Lance. And then, Brock Purdy ends up being the replacement. Then you go to the Raiders, and that Lions game was rough because they tried to get the ball to Devontae Adams, but he's overthrowing him, then he's underthrowing him, and it's getting picked off. It just, yeah, and also again he gets hurt a lot. I mean, the Steelers game during the year, I mean he just I remember the way he got tackled on a play, I feel like he just gets unlucky sometimes with his injuries. Like, the injuries just find a way to... He just gets injured, but he's not even, I don't even know how to say it. Like, he's just not even trying to, obviously people are not trying to get hurt, but, it's just how he gets tackled on some plays. I mean, even you go back to last year when he gets hurt against Miami, it was how he got tackled, and that's what happened with the foot injury. I mean, against the Steelers. The play, you know what I'm talking about, where it looked like he was just, his legs were caught underneath, and he was bending back this way, and that's just what happens. He's just unlucky, I feel like, when it comes to the injuries. So, but again, I think he deserves a chance to be a backup somewhere. So, we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But the Raiders, their quarterback situation, right now it's unknown, but you still got Aiden O'Connell, probably still be on the team. But yeah, whether they go with the veteran or with the draft, which, they got the 13th pick. It doesn't, we'll see if maybe they trade up, but, whoever falls to them, they'll, take them. Because, you know what, they do have a good supporting cast. You got Devontae Adams still there, although we'll talk about him in a second of one of the possible scenarios that could happen in the offseason, but I might, it's possible, but I'm not going to say it's likely. But you got him, you got Jacoby Myers, I don't know what they're going to do with the running back situation, whether they keep Josh Jacobs, they move off him, because Zamir White was good when Jacobs was hurt. So, I mean, I don't think the Raiders' situation is horrible. It definitely is a lot better than what it's been in years past. So, I mean, Davante Adams is still one of the best receivers in the NFL. So, automatically you're stepping into a better situation with him there. But we'll see. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it when talking about this. Let me know what you guys think in the comments about this whole Garoppolo situation. Because, again, it was kind of interesting that, like, the suspension part, yes. The being released, that doesn't really surprise me. But let me know what you guys think about it. So when we come back from our first break of the show, we'll talk about possible moves that could impact the NFL offseason. Again, an article I saw on Bleacher Report. I'll talk about the likelihood of some of the moves here, and that will be the second part of the show. So, with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we're going to talk about some possible moves of the offseason. I'll give you my opinions on the likelihood of each move. So that's what we're going to do here. So, again, Bleacher Report's kind of been my best friend lately. So the first scenario is the Jets acquire Davante Adams. Now, as much as that would be great for Aaron Rodgers, I don't think that's going to happen, just because of the fact that, Davante Adams was one of the players that was advocating for Antonio Pierce to get the full-time head coaching job. And I feel like he's fine now with the Raiders. So I don't see... I mean, the Jets are going to do everything they can to try to, get him, but I don't know if that's going to end up happening. So according to Adam Schefter, the Jets did inquire with the Raiders about Adams ahead of the trade deadline, which I do remember hearing about that. But it just there was really no movement there. And also the other thing too is, as it talks about, Adams' contract won't be easy to move, and the Raiders can save $17.5 million in salary cap space by moving off of Davante Adams after June 1st, as opposed to $1.8 million before that date. Now, again, it would be great for Aaron Rodgers, and that would be great for the Jets. I mean, you give Garrett Wilson, another threat, so it's not all the attention's on him and on Breece Hall. You bring in Davante Adams, who's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. But I just don't really... I don't think it's going to happen. I think he's going to stay with the Raiders. I mean, again, I would love to see him and Rodgers pair up one more time, but I don't think that's going to happen. But we'll see. I could be wrong. I would like to be wrong because, again, I got a lot of friends that are Jet fans that would be excited if they got him, but it's just I don't think that's going to happen. So another one is it possible the Chiefs lose another star? So they lost Tyreek Hill, talks about lost Orlando Brown, one of their tackles. But now you got Chris Jones. Now Chris Jones came out and said at the parade that he wants to be back for the three-peat. But, the Chiefs, they still got to pay him. And he played under the franchise tag. So yeah, I mean, they're going to look to try to bring him back, obviously, because he is their best player on defense. So yeah, he's set to become an unrestricted free agent. And while the Chiefs still have the ability to hit the 29-year-old with the franchise tag for the second year in a row, that approximate $33 million price tag could very well be a problem for their cap situation, because they have less than $23 million in cap space, and they still have some other free agents that they want to try to bring back as well. So, yeah, that's something they're going to have to deal with. And also, I was looking at the cap space situations because CBS actually posted teams that have that are in the best cap situations and the teams that are in the worst. And the Saints had like 80, I think they're like 73 or $83 million over the cap. I still don't understand how that's possible, but the Saints cap situation's been like that for a while. But yeah, I mean, the Chiefs are going to have to figure it out. But that's why we talked about this. Mahomes is going to renegotiate his contract. Which listen, he wants to get paid, but at the same time, Mahomes wants to win too. And renegotiating it, giving the Chiefs more flexibility to try to keep some other players, I mean, that's important. And that's also what Tom Brady did as well. So we'll see if that ends up happening. But, yeah, I mean, listen, if the Chiefs lost Chris Jones, that would be a humongous loss on defense. Also, it talked about the possibility of the Caleb Williams, Cliff Kingsbury combo in Washington. And, we'll see if that ends up happening. I mean, it really just all depends on what, the Bears end up doing, the Patriots as well. Because the Commanders have the third pick. Oh, no, they hold the number 2 overall pick. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Again, the Bears could say, we'll trade out, get a lot of assets for it, or they trade Justin Fields. I don't know. That's going to be interesting. But, I mean, I think they both want that to end up happening. Again, it's all going to depend on what the Bears do. But I think if the Bears end up taking a quarterback, it's probably going to end up being Caleb Williams. But they could shock us and take somebody else. But I don't know if that's going to happen either. I mean, unless the Commanders want to trade up. But I don't know. But, yeah, they're looking for a quarterback. And again, I want to bring this up, with the Commanders. It's weird how Sam Howell started off the year, and you thought, oh, they got a nice quarterback here with Sam Howell, and then everything just kind of fell apart after that. So I'm curious to see what ends up happening with him. Because, yeah, I mean, in the beginning of the year, it looked good, but it just, again, towards the end, it was not very good. So we'll see. And then also talks about the AFC South and the spending spree they could possibly go on. So the Tennessee Titans have $74 million in cap space and have just one impending free agent who ranks in the top 50 of Pro Football Focus, which is Derrick Henry, one of the top running backs on the market. The Colts have more than $66 million in cap space and also have just one top 50 unrestricted free agent, and that's Kenny Moore. And then the Texans own more than $65 million in cap space and have no top 30 free agents to be, although 3 in the top 50. But that was something I did talk about, how they, on the defensive side of the ball, they have some guys that are going to be free agents. Now, the Jaguars, they talk about how they're down in the middle of the pack in terms of cap space. Now, they got Josh Allen and Calvin Ridley that are on the free agent market, and they're I mean, Josh Allen's one of their best defensive players, and also, I mean, we'll see if they end up bringing back Ridley. But yeah, I mean, these teams have the ability to spend. Now, the Jags, the Texans, and the Colts, I mean, those teams are in a better spot. Well, considering, one of them won the division, two of them just missed the playoffs. The Titans have some have a little bit of a way to go. Because, I mean, you go into next year, I mean, Anthony Richardson comes back for the Colts. The Texans in year 2 now. The Jags, I mean, they're going to look to try to, redeem themselves from what happened, the collapse. They got the ability to spend. I mean, the Titans have the ability to spend too, so, we'll see what happens there. But, yeah, I mean, you'd still kind of rank the Titans last right now among these teams, even though it's very early. But, yeah, I mean, listen, I'm excited to see what Anthony Richardson does if he stays healthy next year. Because in the limited time we saw him, he looked really good. And credit to the Colts, they still hung around to the very end, missed the playoffs by a game. Now you get Anthony Richardson back, full year of Jonathan Taylor too. And, let's see what they do. And the Texans, I mean, they're only going to get better. I mean, now that they got all this cap space, I mean, they could go out and try to add another receiver maybe. Running back as well. I mean, there's some big running backs out there. Whether they go after Saquon Barkley, maybe Derrick Henry goes to them. You never know. I know some people were saying maybe Dallas he ends up going to, which we'll talk about Dallas in the next segment. But only time will tell what ends up happening. But yeah, well, let's see if these teams end up going on a spending spree. And then also, so a couple more moves here, or a couple more hypotheticals here. So where does Kirk Cousins land? Another fascinating storyline of the offseason, especially because, getting older, coming off of the Achilles injury. Is he going to go back to Minnesota? Is he going to go elsewhere? That's something to definitely keep an eye on. Because obviously, if he doesn't get hurt, I mean, I don't know, would the Vikings maybe have franchise tagged him? I don't know. Because he definitely would get a lot of offers. He'd be getting offers immediately. Now it's just, I mean, he's still going to get offers, but, again, there's the speculation of how he's going to perform after a significant injury. So that's something that we just got to keep an eye on as well. Then of course you got the Bears. Will they or won't they? It says, and that's talking about Caleb Williams. Again, there is that scenario that was floated out there that they could possibly. It's out there. I think Schefter said it, or somebody said it. Is that they could keep Justin Fields and draft a quarterback, and it's like, why would you do that? You got to get assets. I mean, if they want to build around Justin Fields, I mean, you could definitely get a haul for the number 1 pick. But again, if you want to reset the clock and draft a rookie quarterback, then you trade Fields. But yeah, you're going to get some assets for him, but you're not going to get a significant package as opposed to, if you're looking to move off of the number 1 pick. So that's definitely a big storyline of the offseason. Yeah, so some of these, like the Devontae Adams to the Jets, I think is the least likely thing to happen. With some of these other things listed, they're more realistic. Well, the Cliff Kingsbury Caleb Williams reunion could end up happening, but again, we'll see. But yeah, I think the Devontae Adams Aaron Rodgers reunion, I don't know. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's the least likely to happen. But yeah, I mean, again, with the AFC South, we'll see if those teams end up spending. Again, the we're in the offseason now, so once we get into the new league year, that's when things get exciting. See where all these free agents end up going, all the speculation, things like that. So yeah, but let me know what you guys think about these possible scenarios that could happen in the offseason. And before we go to break, I just want to remind you guys once again, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized, make sure to go to the following link. That is streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker on the bottom of the show segment down below. So, when we come back from our second break of the show, we're going to talk about what Micah Parsons has suggested for the Cowboys, what he thinks the Cowboys should do in the offseason. So, with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back once again here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we're going to talk about what Micah Parsons had to say. He talked about some suggestions for the Cowboys here in the offseason. So, a couple things. So, he talked about the need for bigger players on the defensive side, mentioning the importance of adding a large interior lineman to stop the run. He talked about Chris Jones, a Chris Jones-like player. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be Chris Jones, but again, that's something he talked about. The other thing, too, is adding strong linebackers. And he talked about the Ravens with Roquan Smith. He talked about the 49ers with Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. That was another thing, too. I mean, again, you look at the Cowboys' defense, and, they got great players, including him. On the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, you got DeMarcus Lawrence as well. And Deron Bland had a good season with his interceptions, his pick sixes. Obviously, they were missing Trayvon Diggs this year. But, yeah, I mean, listen, the defense is opportunistic. They could turn the ball over. And, it's just in the playoffs against the Packers, things fell apart. And, the linebacking core, you had Leighton Vander Esch, the Wolf Hunter, as he was called for a while. But obviously, injuries kind of derailed his career. And listen, he talks about two teams that were the Final Four teams this year. The Ravens with their linebacking core led by Roquan Smith, who they brought over from the Bears, which was a solid trade for them. And then, of course, the 49ers, who do a great job at drafting, Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw. That's a defense that needs to improve, the Cowboys. Because, again, especially against the Packers. I mean, guys were running wide open. It just was a disaster. And we'll see what Mike Zimmer now brings, taking over as a defensive coordinator, with Dan Quinn leaving to go coach in Washington. But, yeah, I mean, listen, you got that. But then he also talked about as well on the offensive side of the ball. He also brought up, Tony Pollard, and trying to improve this running game, keeping Pollard. But also, again, you got to bring in someone to pair with him because that worked really well in 2022 with him and Ezekiel Elliott, a good 1-2 combination. That's something that I think they were definitely missing from their offense. And, they didn't really run the ball against the Packers, well, also because they were playing from behind so much. But, again, I've said this numerous times, I think a lot of us can agree that, it's because of Pollard coming off of the injury in the playoff game against the 49ers. Well, let's see how he is the following season, because he was one of the more explosive running backs in the league before he got hurt. Then he gets hurt in the playoffs against the Niners, and yeah, this year it looked like he kind of lost a step. But again, that could be just him trying to build himself back up from the injury that he suffered. And I talked about this in the last segment, that Derrick Henry has kind of been a name that's been floated around maybe as a guy that could end up in Dallas. I mean, you got Derrick Henry and Tony Pollard. That would be a nice combination. Those two guys. Derrick Henry then doesn't have to be the 3-down back. I mean, you work them both into the offense, and I think that could work. And Pollard's the more of a receiving back as opposed to Derrick Henry, but I think that could maybe work. But and also, how about I didn't watch it, but how about Micah Parsons' performance in the celebrity All-Star game with All-Star Weekend for the NBA? I think he was the MVP, right? He had 37 points. Yeah. He's an athlete. And I know he's gotten some criticism because he kind of disappeared in the playoff game against the Packers, but he's a very good player. And I kind of wish I do wish that the Giants had him, because I think they were close to getting him, but yeah. So I mean, I understand what he's saying. I mean, look, it's easier said than done when it comes to his suggestions on the defensive side of the ball. I think bringing in another running back to go along with Pollard is also a good idea as well. But again, the Cowboys got to go out there and we'll see what they end up doing. But one of the things I'll say though is you also need to improve when it comes to coaching and also the quarterback position, because again, Dak Prescott has this great season, but ends up coming up short in the playoffs once again. And Mike McCarthy, it looked like the team just was not prepared. Cowboys have only won one playoff game with him as the head coach, and it was against a Bucs team that was not that good in Brady's last year. So, listen, the Cowboys can add, whoever they want, but ultimately, it also has to come down to the coaching as well. And your quarterback's got to show up in big moments. Now, the conference, again, is going to be better next year. I mean, I don't have to go through it, but I've gone through it several times since, the Cowboys got eliminated. This conference is going to be better. And this was your one chance to maybe get to the NFC Championship game, get another crack at the 49ers, and see what happens. I know they got destroyed in, week 4 or week 5? They played in the regular season. But the playoff game was close. And playoffs are different. They are different. So, who's to say they couldn't have played a close game against the 49ers? And look at how the 49ers played against the Lions and the Packers. Who's to say the Cowboys couldn't have done that? They have the talent for it. But, again, they didn't get there. So, it's... For me, I don't know what they can do that is really going to... I mean, again, they finished 12-5 this year. They won the division. This is a weak NFC, and they lost to the Packers, who many people thought were, this is a, rebuild mode. Well, yeah. I mean, we didn't expect them to get this far, and they did, and they almost made it to the NFC Championship game. So now they're going to be better next year. It's just, I mean, you look at the division. I mean, the Eagles, they fell apart, but I think the Eagles are going to be back to, being a good team next year. It's just, between the coordinators, Super Bowl hangover, I think, it's just, I don't know. I don't know what happened there, but, yeah, everything changed after they lost to the 49ers. So, that's your competition right now is the Eagles for the division, because the Commanders, they got a lot of stuff to figure out. Well, I think the Giants have the most to figure out of anybody in the division, but I think there might just be a little bit of Giants bias. But because at least like with the Commanders, they have a top pick, so they're going to take a quarterback. with the Giants, they have so many other issues besides the quarterback position. They don't really have wide receivers. Like, at least with the Commanders, you could say, oh, well, they have Terry McLaurin, as a number one, even though I remember the quote he said. He's like, oh, at least I was running cardio for one of the games because he just was not getting the ball. Listen, I'd take Terry McLaurin. But yeah, and then the Giants with their issues, quarterback, offensive line, running back, it's just that there's so many issues with the Giants. But yeah, for the Cowboys, Eagles are competition for the division. But then, the conference, again, is going to be better. So I think really the fact that they kept Mike McCarthy, I don't think is the right thing to do, because you're in the same position you've been every single year he's been the coach. Now, again, you go back to Jason Garrett. How many chances did Jason Garrett get? There were many times where, after going 8-8, 8-8, 8-8, 3 years in a row, that should have been it for him. But then the following year, they had a good season with Romo. DeMarco Murray leads the league in rushing, so he sticks around. Then Romo gets hurt the following year. Then 2016, Romo gets hurt, but then they have Dak and Zeke, and then they're the 1 seed. And then 2017, they just missed the playoffs. 2018, they make the playoffs. They win a playoff game, but then they lose in the second round. 2019, that ended up being the final straw there, because they missed the playoffs. And then Mike McCarthy takes over, and again, first year, Dak gets hurt, has that horrific injury. Then the following season, Dak comes back. They make the playoffs. They lose to the 49ers in the first round. Then the following year, lose to the 49ers again in the second round, and then this year losing the first round. So it's just the Cowboys are in the same position they've been in for years. They just cannot get past the divisional round. They didn't even make it out of the first round. So and they have all this talent. No matter what they do, what players they add, it's ultimately going to come down to the coach. And I just think with Mike McCarthy, they're going to end up in the same position next year. So I think you got to that needs to be something that had to be changed, and they're not going to change that. So it's going to be it might be another wasted year for them. And again, with Dak Prescott, I think Dak Prescott is a solid quarterback. Definitely is better than how he first started out, because now it's kind of become his team. Because, again, he stepped into a great situation. Top offensive line, prime Zeke, his rookie season. You had Dez Bryant, Jason Witten, Cole Beasley, Terrence Williams. These are throwbacks. Again, Cowboys come up on Immaculate Grid, and you could put one of those guys. Terrence Williams is a throwback. But, yeah, and then as the years went on, it kind of morphed into Dak's team. And, again, Dak's put up good numbers, but ultimately you get to the postseason, and he comes up short. And who does that remind you of? Tony Romo. That was Tony Romo, too. It's just, I don't know. I'm not really expecting a whole lot from the Cowboys next year. I'm expecting them to be good, be a good regular season team, but to get to the playoffs, that's when they really got to show you what they're made of. And listen, I had them going to the NFC Championship game because I just thought, they should make it. Number 2 seed. Conference isn't loaded like it has been in years past. They still couldn't do it. So next year, listen, they could be the 1 seed next year. You got to show me that you could get to, the next step. And for my whole life, they have not been able to do that. Especially since I started watching football. So, and they have had some great teams. Well, very good teams. When the Giants went on their first Super Bowl run with Eli Manning, the Cowboys were really good that year. Cowboys beat them twice, but it was that third time Giants beat them. You had the year, like I said, the year with DeMarco Murray, Zeke's rookie season, Zeke and Dak's rookie season. Those teams were good, but they just could not get past the divisional round. And those 2 losses came against, well, Aaron Rodgers. So it just, I don't know. But listen, Micah Parsons, again, I understand what he's saying. And, I think, the running game is something to improve on. The defense, you want to add some better personnel there. Linebacking core. Of course, I mean, nothing he said was wrong. But I think ultimately what's going to hold them back is their head coach and their quarterback. So, that's really my thoughts on that. Again, Dak Prescott, I think, is a solid quarterback, but it's just he has not, in the playoffs lately, he just does not perform. So we're going to continue talking about quarterbacks, actually. So when we come back from our final break of the show, we're going to talk about the Steelers quarterback situation. It's something I have talked about before, but a couple of things I was reading last night I just wanted to touch upon and give you my thoughts. And that is what we'll do when we come back from our final break of the show. So, with that being said, stick around and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are going to talk about a couple things I was reading last night regarding the Steelers quarterback controversy, if you want to call it that. So I saw that players are really advocating for Mason Rudolph to be the starter. Now he's going to be a free agent, and it seems like the Steelers are going to. The other thing I saw too is, at least from what I was reading, the Steelers are not looking to sign a veteran quarterback to start over Kenny Pickett for the upcoming season. The team wants to give Pickett another season to establish himself as the long-term starter and avoid creating a quarterback controversy. Well, the players seem to be doing that because they want Mason Rudolph. Now, before I get into that, so we have Carmen in the chat asking, who are we talking about? Well, we were just talking about Dak Prescott, the Cowboys, a couple of suggestions that Micah Parsons had as to what the Cowboys should do in the offseason. And then he said, talk about the Chiefs. Well, here's the thing. I talked about the Chiefs for 2 weeks and, leading up to the Super Bowl. So, well, actually I did. I talked about Chris Jones actually today. So I still talked about the Chiefs. So, and listen, they're going to be a topic and they're going to be a team that we will talk about at times during the offseason, looking at receivers maybe they try to add, whether it's through the draft, free agency, and the Chris Jones situation. So that'll continue to be a thing. But it's not going to be the main topic just because, there's some other teams out there that we can also talk about. And listen, if you want to go back, but they won the Super Bowl. Yeah, they did. They did. And believe me, we talked about that all week last week. So if you want to go back and watch those shows, you could definitely go and do that because I greatly appreciate that. Talked about the Chiefs a lot, but there's only so much stuff you could talk about. I mean, I talked about the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl a lot last week. Mahomes' legacy, Andy Reid's legacy, all of that, the GOAT discussion. There's plenty of past videos where I talk about the Chiefs. So I recommend that you go and do that. So now let's get into this. So yeah, when Mason Rudolph took over for Kenny Pickett, took over for Mitchell Trubisky, who actually the Steelers released, which was the right move, in my opinion. Towards the end of the season, Pickett was still hurt, but then he was healthy enough to play, and the Steelers just were like, hey, listen, we're going to ride the Mason Rudolph momentum into the playoffs. Now, again, they were one and done, but still, I think that was the right move. So, yeah, led the Steelers to a 3-0 record the final 3 weeks of the regular season. They clinched the playoff spot. But, yeah, we'll see what ends up happening. So, yeah, Rudolph is set to become a free agent, but the Steelers have expressed their intention to prioritize re-signing him, according to head coach Mike Tomlin and team president Art Rooney II. Retaining Rudolph will give the Steelers the opportunity to have him compete with Pickett for the starting job in the upcoming season. So is that the veteran quarterback that they're going to bring Mason Rudolph back? I don't know. See, now this is another team like the Cowboys where they're probably, again, they're going to be in that same situation again next year. Now, again, I feel like Kenny Pickett's kind of been getting disrespected a little bit just because I know he wasn't spectacular, but the Steelers were winning games before he got hurt. But then he gets hurt, and that's when everything fell apart. And Mitchell Trubisky was playing, and he just was not playing well. And they made the smart move, putting in Mason. Well, again, I didn't know if it was going to be the smart move, but they put Mason Rudolph in, played well against the Bengals. They won a tough game in Seattle. And then, in bad weather against the Ravens, albeit against their backups, they won that game. And they made the playoffs. And listen, they made the game interesting against the Bills. At one point, it was a one-score game, but you got to give Mason Rudolph credit. He stepped in, didn't think he was going to get another shot, and he did. And Steelers made the playoffs, but again, didn't really amount to anything. I think we all kind of figured that the Steelers were not going to win against the Bills, and yeah. It's just the Steelers they got a QB problem. And they want to give Kenny Pickett another shot. But, yeah, I don't know. You look at now, we talked about the Cowboys with the NFC. Look at the Steelers in the AFC. There's a lot of quarterbacks that you would rank over Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett's probably ranked more towards the bottom than he is the top. You look at the quarterbacks in your own division. A healthy Deshaun Watson is ranked over you. And then, of course, you got Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. And then you also look at, the other divisions as well. Anthony Richardson comes back healthy. C.J. Stroud, Trevor Lawrence. Will Levis, again, had a great debut. But after that, it was kind of hit or miss with him. Who else am I missing? So then, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Josh Allen. It's just there's a lot of Kenny Pickett's ranked more towards the bottom half of the team. So you got to have an elite quarterback. And you saw that in the Super Bowl. Listen, Brock Purdy had a great season, but what was the difference in the game? Other than the 49ers' mistakes, it's the quarterback, and that's, again, not to discredit Brock Purdy, but listen, Patrick Mahomes is an all-time great, elite quarterback. You got to have that. And again, the Chiefs' offense wasn't great this year, but you know what? They have him. They got Travis Kelce, Andy Reid. They had those guys, and that ultimately was also the Chiefs' defense too was a big factor as to why they got back to the Super Bowl as well. But you got to have an elite quarterback, and the Steelers, like Kenny Pickett, I don't think is bad, but I don't think he's going to be somebody that's going to elevate the Steelers to the promised land. As much as I don't want to say that because we have the same name, not the exact same name, but the same first name. But Brock is a pretty good quarterback. He is. But is he great? No, he's not great. But he's good. He's solid. But and with the Steelers, they're kind of going to be in the same situation next year. I mean, I think they're just going to kind of be. They'll have a decent record, but ultimately they'll get to the playoffs, and I don't really expect them to. If they get to the playoffs, I don't really expect them to go past the first round because again, it's just there's a lot of teams out there that are better than the Steelers. Now, they have one of the best defensive players in the league in T.J. Watt, who's the quarterback of their defense. But I mean, you gotta have an elite offense. And the Steelers we're inconsistent on offense. The offense was frustrating last year. I mean, you had again everybody calling for Matt Canada's job, and eventually they did that. It just it ended up not really going anywhere. But you got to credit Mason Rudolph for at least getting them to the playoffs. But again, I mean, for Steelers fans that kind of been begging for them to get past the first round, win a playoff game, because they have not won a playoff game again since 2016. That was a long time ago, and it looked like possibly this could have been the year where they said, all right, we're going to move off of Mike Tomlin. And they, they're not going to do that because they ended up making the playoffs. But I don't know. I feel like if they're going to opt to just bring back Mason Rudolph and just have him and Kenny Pickett compete for the starting job, I don't think is the right thing. Because you have some veteran quarterbacks out there that are upgrades. If Kirk Cousins bounces back from the Achilles injury, I think he's a good option. Russell Wilson, if he gets released, maybe you bring him in. Ryan Tannehill. I mean, again, options aren't great, but they could be upgrades. It's just with what they got right now, I don't know. I don't know. Also, in the comments, Kenny should not start. Yeah, I mean, again, though, before he got hurt, the Steelers were winning games, and it's just once he got hurt, then the wheels just fell off. And then that's when they made the change from Trubisky to Mason Rudolph, and they made the playoffs. So I think Kenny Pickett does deserve another shot, but, I think bringing in competition, would be a good thing for him. But if Mason Rudolph is the only competition you're bringing in, well, I don't know about that. And again, Kenny Pickett was healthy enough to play. They just did not want to go to him. They just rode with Mason Rudolph. So, yeah, I don't know. This is another thing to keep an eye on as well. I know there also the thing we talked about this. Justin Fields maybe being a possibility if they traded for him. We'll see, but it doesn't look like that. But again, with the players, some players advocating for Mason Rudolph. I mean that's you don't want that because that could divide up the locker room. I mean, you also saw and I thought about this too. You go back to the Zach Wilson, Mike White situation. I mean, you had Jets players wearing Mike White T-shirts. I mean, that whole situation was a mess. You don't want to have that, But again, Steelers made the playoffs because they made the quarterback change, and they put in Mason Rudolph. So yeah, I mean, I can understand why the players are saying, "Hey, let's keep riding it with Mason." But we'll see. Again, we got a whole off season, but again, this is another thing to kind of keep an eye on. Because yeah, I mean, listen, you drafted Kenny Pickett, and he gets hurt. Mason Rudolph, wins those final 3 games. You make the playoffs. Yeah, first they got to bring back Mason Rudolph. Then we'll talk about them two battling it out for the starting quarterback job. So we'll see. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, we'll be back again tomorrow, same time, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. As always, make sure to look out for the shorts that I will release later today. As always, and then I will work on getting the four parts, break down the show into 4 parts. So if you missed anything, you could just go back and watch the segments of the show. And make sure to look at all the other past shows as well, not just from my show, but from the other podcasts here on the GSMC Sports Network. But so with that is all the time that we have for today. Once again, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow. And until then, I am Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.